So I mean, I hate to get into this because it's been talked about for so long, but I think I agree with you, Douglas, and I just want to make sure that we're saying the same thing. Can you lay out the controversy that you've been embroiled in here recently?
Do you mean, sorry, because I tend to be embroiled in quite a lot of controversy. Which one are you talking about?
The one where you're accused of saying, don't listen to anybody unless they have an Oxford degree.
Something which, of course, I never said.
Yeah, I know.
Never would say. I think this is the controversy that came up from my recent appearance on Joe Rogan podcast. The simple thing I said, which has been, I think, misrepresented by a very large number of people deliberately, is that everybody has the right to say anything they like about anything. But that doesn't mean that all opinions should be regarded as being equal. Mm-hmm. And when I was brought on to debate, and it's not often in Joe Rogan's podcast that he ever does that. He normally has people on who just give their opinion, and you can take it or leave it. But he felt that clearly that a pro-Israel voice like mine had to be countered on air. And when I was talking about my recent book, recent bestseller on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization, I got into the weeds of what has been happening in the last 2 years in the Middle East. I got into it not just because I've written about it, but because I've seen it all up close. I've spent the last couple of years mainly living in Israel and being embedded with the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza and in Lebanon and elsewhere. And I've seen this war up close. And I discovered that the person I was being pitched against, who was wildly, wildly uninformed on issue after issue, was just spouting and spouting and spouting, turned out never to have even been to the region. And I said, this is like if we were to discover that Chinese state media had somebody on all the time talking about America, claiming that America is a racist country, claiming that black Americans are currently being lynched and sold into slavery. If we discovered that that person was rampaging across the Chinese media, that he had never been to America, didn't speak English, and obviously so, because he's so wildly misinformed, we would regard that person as being almost comical in their ignorance, certainly malevolent. So why should it be that when there are people at home here in America who are also just not informed, just as many British people are not informed about big situations in the world that they're talking about, why should their opinion be regarded as being somehow sacrosanct? I don't think it is. And yes, I believe in standards. I believe that elites have let us down badly. Experts have let us down badly. But it doesn't mean there is no such thing as expertise or comparative expertise in matters. And if people don't understand that, and don't understand that, for instance, a journalist who goes and reports firsthand may well get things wrong, but it's a darn sight better than somebody who's never left their bedroom and thinks they know the world.
You know, I just read a quote. I think it was from Jefferson, and I've adapted it to modern times. The man who reads nothing at all is better educated than the man who reads nothing but social media. He said newspapers, but I think that's the kind of expert we have now that are running around. And I don't believe in you have to be credentialed or anything like that. I don't think you have to have a formal education. I don't think that hurts. But I think serious people can do serious study on their own, especially in today's world, and become an expert in a field. But, you know, you also have to have enough humility to go, look, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know. I've just done a lot of homework, and I'm open to different opinions, but here's what I found.
Right. Absolutely. And there's a lot of good that can come from that. And we all do that to some extent. But that is, as you say, the ignorance that social media in particular is able to push on people is extraordinary, not least because of the lack of humility. And one of the things in that debate. It was really me against Joe and the comedian he'd put me on with. One of the things that was startling about it was the sheer lack of humility of the guy I was debating. Yeah. I mean, he seemed to think that he knew everything about Israel and the IDF, despite never having been there or met anyone or spoken with anyone on the ground in the IDF. And he seemed to think that he knew better than the Israeli Defense Forces how they should protect their people from another massacre like October the 7th. Like, maybe the generals in the Israeli army and the politicians and others who have been losing family for the last 18 months fighting in Gaza, maybe they do know something more than you have gleaned from social media sitting in Austin, Texas. Maybe. It's my view. I mean, people quite often say to me, what would you tell this politician, or what would you tell this general when you meet them? And I always say, I don't tell them anything. I listen. Because that's much, much more important, because they know more about the proximate causes of the conflict and what they're doing to prevent it. And when I hear and see these people, there was a guy, one of Joe Rogan's friends, who'd been cropping up on social media recently, and he accepted this challenge that I put out, which was, if you have a plan for how you would get 250 hostages back from the densely built up and booby-trapped area of Gaza, and if you know how to get 250 hostages back and how to kill or capture all the leadership of Hamas, if you have a better plan than what the Israelis have been doing from the last 18 months, let me know, and I will pass it on to anyone I know in Jerusalem. Okay? And one of these comedians decided to take up this challenge. And you know what he said? He said, among other things, he said, why don't they fight like men?
What the hell does that mean?
Fight like men? And you say, I'm sorry, I've been to the funerals of young men who had no desire to have to ever be in Gaza again, who lost their lives because they were fighting house to house with terrorists embedded in mosques and in hospitals and in civilian homes and cropping up from tunnels all over the place. And if the IDF and the Israeli Air Force had wanted to level the place, they could have done. But they didn't, because they wanted to minimize casualties on their opponent's side and minimize casualties on their own. And you have to put up with some doofus claiming that he's the real man, and he knows because he's sitting in a podcast studio somewhere 2 continents away. And I think that is just objectionable on every level and displays a lack of humility and understanding that is almost pathological.
I tell you, Douglas, I mean, I think I struggled from this a little bit. I mean, I've done this job for almost 50 years now. But when I got into television, everything changes so rapidly. And I was pretty assured that I was right on things. We had a big, I spent a lot of money on research and everything else at really good, we were buttoned up. But when I left there and I was reflecting on what I had done, I came to the understanding, and I think this just comes from maturity and experience, and that is the only thing I'm certain of is that I'm not certain of anything. I don't know. I'm like you. I will ask questions. I will voice my opinion. I will voice what I do know, but that doesn't necessarily make it the absolute truth. I need to understand more of the situation. Yes,
and you do that. And one of the things, Glenn, is that all of us who I hope are curious and want to learn more and know more and understand things better, we have that instinct. But it also doesn't mean that on the things we know about, including the things we've seen with our own eyes, that we should be lacking in confidence to say what we know and what we see.
It's a really tough place to be. You have to have the confidence in what you do know, but you also have to have the humility to say, but I don't know everything.
Right. And one of the things that I do know is that having seen war up close, not just in this conflict, but in others as well, I know what the difference is between a death cult, as I call Hamas, like a death cult like Hamas, that fights for death, fights to bring death to its enemies, fights to bring death to its own side, even to its own children. I know the difference between a death cult like that and a democracy like Israel or the United States of America, and our armies who fight for life, who fight to minimize casualties on our own side and fight to minimize casualties on the enemy side. And there is all the difference in the world between these two things.
Okay,
and when I see people finding it complicated to tell the difference between a democracy and a death cult, I think they are lost.